Hey guys, tonight we're going to read a story about a little girl who loves lima beans. Her name is Camilla, and it is The Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla always worried about what other people thought of her. Today, she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none of them seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress as she looked in the mirror, and then she screamed. Her mother ran into the room, and she screamed too. "Oh, my heavens!" she cried. "You're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered. "But just look at me." "You get back in bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say. And she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. "Most extraordinary," he exclaimed. "I've never seen anything like it. You're having coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camilla told him. "I feel fine." "Well then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, "I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal. But when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. The other kids thought this was great, and one yelled out, "See some purple polka dots!" And sure enough, Camilla turned purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted out, "Checkerboard!" and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out stripes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you could change channels on the TV. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious." Camilla was embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything we can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans. But she'd been laughed at enough for one day. Well, yes, I see," Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. "I think I'd better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over." An hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Group, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialist went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Crump. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not the chicken pox," put in Dr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialist, and they each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. "Take one of each before bed," said Dr. Crump. Then they filed out the door, followed by Dr. Bumble. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. Then she woke in the morning. She did not feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, Staring back at her was a giant, multicolored pill with a face on it. Oh no. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called. But this time, instead of specialists, he brought experts. Dr. Gord and Dr. Mellon were the finest specialist scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. It must be a virus, he announced. Suddenly, fizzy-like virus balls appeared all over Camilla. Or possibly a form of bacteria, said Dr. Mellon. Out popped spriggly little bacteria tails. Or it could be a fungus, added Dr. Gord. And instantly, Camilla was covered with all different colors of fungus blotches. Ooh. The experts looked at Camilla, then at each other. We need to go over these numbers back at the lab, said Dr. Gord. We'll call you when we know something. But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. By now, the TV news had found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house, telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing girl. Soon, a huge crowd was camped out on her front lawn. The Creams were swamped with all sorts of remedies, from psychologists to allergists to herbologists to nutritionists, psychics and an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Even so-called cures only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance, until it was so hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail. Nothing worked. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure her. Close your eyes, breathe deep, become one with the room. I wish you hadn't said that, Camilla groaned. Slowly, she began to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth and her nose the dresser, and the two paintings were her eyes. The therapist came screaming out and ran from the house. What are we going to do? Cried Mrs. Cream. It just gets worse and worse. She began to sob. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. She went into Camilla's room and looked around. Oh, my goodness, she said with her head shaking. What we have here is a bad case of stripes, one of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, these will do the trick. Are they magic beans? asked Mrs. Cream. Oh, no, replied the old lady. There's no such thing as those. These are plain old lima beans. I bet you'd like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big helping plate full of lima beans more than anything, but she was afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans. Oh dear, said the old woman. I guess I was wrong. She put the beans back in her bag and started toward the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would have tasted so good she probably couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The truth is, I love lima beans. I thought so, the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them in Camilla's mouth. Mmm, said Camilla. Suddenly, the branches and the feathers and the squiggly tails began to disappear, and the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. I'm cured, she shouted. Yes, said the old woman. I knew the real you was there all the time. And she went out and vanished into the crowd. Afterwards, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had a touch of the stripes again. So it seems that all Camilla really needed to do was be herself. And after she began being herself, all her problems were solved. It's good when you can be yourself. Do you like lima beans? I love lima beans, and I'm not afraid to say it. Have a great night. Bye.